Welcome to IFRS Meaning. Today we will talk about the carrying amount of an asset, and we will learn how to calculate its value.
The carrying amount of an asset is the value recognized after deducting accumulated depreciation or amortization and impairment losses. For example, an entity acquires a building in year 1 for $200,000 with a useful life of 30 years. In year 12, the depreciation of the asset will be $80,000. Therefore, the carrying amount of the building at the end of this year will be $120,000. Everything seems simple to this point. The issue gets a bit more complicated when an entity has impairment losses. For example, let's assume that an entity acquires a machine in year 1 for $40,000 with a useful life of 12 years. At the end of year 5, the machines were obsolete because new technologies entered the market. The consequence of this economic event is that the machines lost value. In other words, the recoverable amount of the asset is now $10,000. When we refer to the recoverable amount, we mean the maximum value for which an entity could sell this asset in the market. As you can see, the company must recognize an impairment loss. So, to calculate this loss, we must calculate the asset's carrying amount at the end of the reporting period. Therefore, this calculation results in a carrying amount of $23,333. This means that the entity must recognize an impairment loss of $13,333, which is the difference between the carrying amount and its recoverable amount. Now the question that many may ask is what happens with the calculation of the depreciation of this asset for year 6. In this case, we need to review paragraph 63 of IAS 36. This paragraph set out when impairment loss exists. Depreciation will be calculated based on the new carrying amount, taking its remaining useful life as a reference. In other words, to calculate the depreciation of year 6, we must take the carrying amount at the end of year 5, equal to $10,000, and divide this amount by the remaining useful life of the asset. In this way, the depreciation expense for year 6 will equal $1,428, which will result from dividing 10,000 by 7 years. Also, there are other factors that can affect the calculation of an asset's carrying amount. An example of this is the change in its useful life. Taking the previous example as a reference, suppose that at the beginning of year 6, due to new information received by the entity, the asset's useful life is no longer 12 years, but 20. In this example, we will assume that the asset is not impaired. This event is a change in an accounting estimate that should be recognized prospectively. If you want to know a little more about the changes in accounting estimates, we recommend you review some of the videos on our channel in relation to this topic. So, when we say that the recognition of this economic event must be done prospectively, it means that we must affect the present and future financial statements, but not the financial statements of prior periods. Consequently, to calculate the depreciation for year 6, we will take the carrying amount at the end of year 5 and divide this value by the remaining useful life of 15 years. Let's remember that now the useful is 20 years, but we must consider that 5 years have already passed. For this reason, the remaining useful life will be 15 years. So, the depreciation expense for this year will be $1,555. Another factor that can impact the carrying amount of an asset occurs when an entity has a property, plant, and equipment that it measures in its subsequent measurement at revalued cost. For example, an entity acquired a building in year 1 for $20,000 with a useful life of 35 years. At the end of year 10, the asset's fair value is $17,000. As you might imagine, we also need to calculate the asset's carrying amount at the end of year 10. This results in a carrying amount of $14,285. As we see, we must adjust the asset's value to reach fair value because, as we said before, the entity uses the revaluation model in the subsequent measurement of this asset. If you are unfamiliar with this model, I leave you an illustrative example in the video description. It is important to say that when we refer to property, plant, and equipment, this model only applies to entities that use real estate, and use revaluation in their subsequent measurement. So, in this case, we must eliminate the accumulated depreciation recognized to date, and adjust the asset's value to reach fair value. As you can see, by eliminating accumulated depreciation, the asset's value will be $20,000, therefore, we must adjust the asset by $3,000 to equalize it to fair value. Now the new carrying amount will be $17,000, and on this value, we must calculate the depreciation for subsequent years, taking the remaining useful life as a reference. I hope this example where we explain the carrying amount of an asset and how it is calculated has been useful for you. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and we see us in the following videos.
Finally, if you want to learn IFRS, be an expert and make a difference, we remind you to review our course on International Financial Reporting Standards. The course has more than 270 explanatory videos, more than 370 analysis questions, personalized advice, and real-world examples and cases. In the video description, you can find all the course information. Cheer up, and take your professional career to the next level.